Hello and welcome. Happy Thursday. Welcome to another live with C Admissions. I am Susan Berishaj, the founder, and I'm so excited to talk with you about the MBA interview preparation. I know that most of you who are considering round one applications are still in the process of putting together your applications before September 4th for the likes of Wharton and Harvard. But it's an important conversation to start thinking about and preparing. And I know once you're done with those, you're going to start your interview preparation. So you'll have a set of or a series of videos to watch that will help you in that next phase. So today we're going to cover the 5 steps to an exceptional interview preparation plan. And you want to do this sooner rather than later. We are in a few different platforms, so I would love to hear what your questions are along the way. I have a screen on this side, so I will be monitoring questions that come in. So please write your questions in the comments of any of the platforms that you're joining us from. So whether that's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. So with that, why don't we get started immediately? Perfect. So our agenda, as usual, we're going to talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the timeline. I know most of the people that are going through this process for the first time don't quite know when to anticipate interviews. And then the interview invites come out and they panic essentially as to, I need to prepare for interviews. I haven't done anything yet. I have less than 2 weeks to interview, or I have a week to interview. It's important to keep this time frame in mind. So typically for those of you who are now in round one, the interview invites start coming out actually relatively quickly. Beginning of October until mid-November is when interviews are going on for round one. And then decisions, of course, come out in December. Some schools, so for you who are interviewing at Kellogg, that interviews about 80% of the applicants, you want to start prepare, like it's essentially almost a guaranteed interview. You want to start the preparation as soon as you submit your applications to Kellogg. And of course, if you're not targeting Kellogg, just know that this time frame is when interview invites come out. So you want to have your plan and your preparation started well in advance of this to make sure that you have a successful interview experience. For round two, late January to early February interview invites start coming out, and the interviews go until mid-March, depending on the school, depending on their time frame as far as like when they release interviews, and then how long you have to complete your interview by the time that you are done. And then for round 3 applicants is typically April, because the time frame between submission and decision is much shorter than for round 1 and round 2. It's typically reflective of just a pool of applicants that apply as well for those rounds, for round 3. Okay, so let's talk about the plan. So we're going to talk about your evaluation, the research, reflection, preparation, and mock interviews, as well as a bonus comment at the end to make sure that you have a successful plan ahead of the interviews. So, sorry, let me just mute this. So let's start with the evaluation part. Just like with everything, you really want to start by evaluating yourself. First and foremost, how do you perform in interviews? And knowing that anyone who's applying to a traditional full-time MBA program is going to have had at least one interview, meaning you've had at least one job, because the minimum requirement to apply is at least 2 years of work experience. So thinking back on the interviews, the last interview that you held, how was your preparation? How was your performance as well? Are you someone who interviews well or not? If you're someone who interviews well, you're going to want to obviously still prepare, still give yourself ample time, but you can mostly rely on the network of people who you have you have, particularly those who have walked the walk, meaning those who have been in the institutions that, or have attended institutions that you are aspiring to attend. If you are not someone who interviews well, you want to start this process extra early to really be ready for the desired outcome that you want, which is to perform well in your interview. This is a high stakes environment in terms of wanting to interview well, because it is part of the admission process, and if you don't do a good job, that obviously will reflect the outcome of your application, and you can't reapply until next year to that same institution. So obviously this is a really high stakes kind of environment here. Then you want to also look at how you answer typical questions in an interview. Are you someone who has a hard time telling their story and being able to show how you stand out? What kind of feedback have your peers provided to you in mock interviews in the past? Did they tell you that you are really good at interviews? Did they give you a lot of constructive feedback? And those should be indications in terms of how you interview. And then how much time do you need to prepare? Typically in an interview in the past that you've done, how much time did you spend pre-interview to prepare, knowing obviously that this is slightly more high stakes than job interviews, because typically you send a lot of job applications, or you have more opportunities. This is a different kind of interviews environment. And then you want to evaluate from your reflection, from this evaluation process of your own self, how you perform. You need to then discern who is going to be your support network in this journey. If you're really strong at interviews and you have a really strong support system, who are individuals that have attended the institution that you're targeting and have the time to give you constructive feedback and help you in this process, then rely on those individuals. If you're not a good interviewer and or don't have a support system of individuals who have gone on the journey that you are going in, then you want to look at coaches to support you in this process. Recognizing this sooner rather than later is going to be extremely important, because the coach that you contract is going to also have a major impact in your preparation practices. So starting earlier, before the interview invites come out, is going to be important to secure the right coach for you. So you want to start the process of interviewing coaches that meet your budget, meet your needs, specific needs, and obviously can commit to giving you X amount of hours to prepare for your interviews. If you want to talk about how we support with the MBA interview and talk about the plan that we can build together for your interview, I encourage you to reach out to schedule a consultation and discuss well in advance of October for round 1 and late January for round 2. So then from there, you're going to want to start your research process. And you may be wondering, Susan, like, I just applied. I know what their school's values are and culture is. I assure you that you still need refreshers. Most applicants are going to apply to several different schools, and you do need to make sure that you are revisiting all the school research that you have done, and continue to have conversations with target school representatives. What is important here is that you understand specifically what value they provide in relation to your goals. It's not about understanding their macro level unique offerings, but rather it's about their offerings in relation to your specific goals. So be able to identify in what way the school that you're targeting is going to be able to provide you those resources you need in order to reach your goals themselves. And obviously the culture and the value helps you prepare in terms of how you show up and build relationship with the interviewer that is interviewing you. Once you've done your research, then you are reflecting. So you know what the school's values are, you know what the school's culture is, you know their unique value proposition in relation to your goals. Now you have to reflect on your own experiences in terms of what you are contributing to the school, and then what experiences are you going to bring to the conversations that you're going to be a part of in an MBA program. So the reflection part is you're going to identify key experiences in your professional life and extracurricular experiences. And this should be more recent. So in the past 2 to 3 years maximum in terms of the experiences that you have had and that you identify in terms of what you want to use in your interview that go beyond what you've written in your application. While most schools do have a blind interview, which means they haven't read your entire application, there are some who are not blind and have read your entire application. So you'll need to have different stories than what you've included in the full packet that you submit. Then you want to, obviously, once you identify the examples, you want to make sure that you are able to share those examples from the perspective of capturing your strengths. This is where throughout the examples that you're sharing, you're consistently communicating beyond the surface level, which is how you show up, what your strengths are, how you handle challenges. And then also you're going to need to reflect on what are your weaknesses and how have you worked on those weaknesses in the past couple of years to strengthen them, in particularly those that are important to everyday business engagements. If a weakness is something that's unrelated, then obviously it's not going to be that important. And then, of course, you are going to weave your understanding of the transferable skills that you currently have into the examples to be able to showcase that you have those transferable skills for your future goals, right? Especially if you're making transitions, it's important that the interviewer gets a sense that you already have a lot of the skills that you need in order to make the transitions that you want to make. And then the preparation, right? All of this is just the gathering of insights up until now. And now it's the preparation in step 4. We had a video last week, I believe, where I talked about what are the most common MBA interview questions that YouTube is going to be linked in today's session. So you can always go and watch what are the common questions. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I will say that you want to actually prepare answers to those common questions. And it's important to write them down, to write responses down in the initial phase, because you need to reflect on how you're going to present that story. It's not that you're going to read your responses in the actual interview, but in the preparation phase, you do need to gather your thoughts and be able to practice your delivery with content that is written down, right? So that's going to be an important element, and it takes a while to do this, by the way. So definitely be giving yourself as much time as possible to prepare for those. And obviously, then you're going to need to look at school-specific interview questions and processes to understand what are the nuances beyond the basics that you need to prepare for that particular interview or for that school that you have targeted and have been invited to interview. I cannot stress enough how important conducting mock interviews is in this process. I'm sure you've all experienced that sometimes, if you practice by yourself, if you practice in your head, it all sounds wonderful, and then you say it out loud or you say it in front of someone and it's just not coming out as you intended it, as you imagined in your head. And that's particularly true for the MBA mock interview, because as much as you prepare in advance, the day of the interview, you are going to be nervous. You're going to be anxious about the interview process. Who is going to be in front of you? Are they going to like you? Are you going to do well? What are they going to write in that report? So you do want to make sure that you have exhausted mocks in advance in order to sound natural in the actual interview. And one of the most common comments that I get is, well, if I practice this much, if I write things down, am I going to sound scripted? If you prepare, so the honest answer is, if you prepare the night before, the week before, and write everything down and only rely on your notes, then yes, you're going to sound scripted. However, if you prepare well in advance, you will practice enough that you will know exactly how to answer those questions without the minutiae details that you have in your notes. So you will not sound scripted if you prepare well in advance. It's kind of like when we read a book, right, that has been published, and the words just flow so naturally and it sounds relatively simple. But the process of getting that simplicity on the page means that it's gone through so many iterations and edits before it was made final in terms of being published. Same thing for the interview. You have to practice a lot for you to sound natural and to be able to perform well on your interview. In your practices, do practice being concise. You don't want answers that are longer than 2 minutes for most of them, and responding with confidence. Initially, as you go through this process, you won't be responding with confidence because you're going to be mostly reading. But over time, you will have internalized your responses enough that you are then focusing on just delivering with confidence, and obviously not sounding scripted. And I always say, like, don't think that you don't need to prepare in order to not sound scripted. Like, you really need to practice. And then, of course, if you're doing mock sessions with whoever you're doing mock sessions, whether that's with a peer, a mentor, your cousin, your roommate, a coach, you always must incorporate the feedback into your original responses, and that is intended to help you refine it. And that's why writing them down initially is actually quite important, because you need to know how have you been responding to the questions to be able to refine the responses, and before you are ready to deliver them very naturally at the end, which is the interview day. And obviously the idea here is, the reason why you're doing these mocks is to be able to elevate your responses beyond what you had initially written, right? Now, I do want to give a bonus step, and this is true for any interview that you do, irrespective of it being an MBA interview or not. You must prepare specific questions to the interviewer that showcase that you are someone who is already imagining themselves in the business school that you are targeting. In most cases, you will know who the interviewer is going to be in advance of your session. And for those that you don't, you have to prepare questions for alumni, students, and an admission rep as an audience. And what that means is, obviously, like, you're not going to ask the same question to an admission representative as you do to someone who is in the program. And you won't ask the same question to someone who is currently in their MBA journey versus someone who has already graduated a couple of years ago now, right? You're going to want to make those questions very specific to the audience that you have in front of you. And what that does is actually shows the interviewer that you are really engaged in this process. You're not someone who is thinking that you're showing up in front of an interviewer and going to be drilled in the interview. And it's not just about your performance, but it's also about them being able to sell the school to you. Why should you choose that particular school? And that mindset is actually very important in this process, because you are evaluating them just as much as they're evaluating you. And you must convey that in the interview that you show up to, right? And the final comment that I will say is that I often hear is, I don't have an interview, therefore I'm not going to start the preparation process early. I will say that that is a huge mistake that applicants make. Unless you feel, of course, that you haven't really put your best foot forward in your applications. And then, okay, I understand that you don't want to invest too much if you don't feel that anything is going to come out of those applications. However, if you're confident in your applications and you've done the things that you need to do in terms of presenting your candidacy in the most effective way that showcases what you bring to the table, then you should anticipate an interview and start the preparation. Even if you're not doing school-specific preparation, you are doing the basics, irrespective of the interview that you are having or interview invite that will come. The basics are actually quite important because they're something that you'll need across schools to be able to effectively communicate your experiences. And one of the things that I feel like it breaks my heart all the time is that when I see really strong applicants in terms of them telling me their story, but then I read the application and it's not reflected in that application. And therefore, even if they were invited in the interview, the performance wasn't well enough for them to be granted an interview. And I feel that there are steps that you can take to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward throughout this entire process. So don't lose momentum once the application is submitted. Continue momentum and make sure that you are preparing for interviews, even on the basic level of, what an MBA interview is like. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing screens and move to questions. Please write your questions in the comments. Let me just exit out of this and move this to here so I can see you, and it looks like I'm looking at you, although I don't see your faces. Okay, so let's go to questions that have come in. So how far in advance should I begin my interview preparation? Interviews should start, you should start preparing for interviews essentially a week after you submit your applications. And the reason why I say about a week, it's just that you want to rest, recover from the application submission process. It's obviously not going to be in your best interest to just, run through this process and not really think about what you need. So taking the time to actually prepare, it's going to be important. So about a week after, and then continue obviously until the interview invites come in. If you are interviewing for round 1, that's going to be beginning of October to mid-November. If you're you can go back to actually the slides and talk about and see what those timeframes are. I know it's a range and it's a very wide range, but it's all depending on the schools that you are targeting. As a reminder, for those of you who are applying to schools that have a video component to the application, so like Kellogg, MIT, Yale, next week's session is actually going to be on the video submissions, so I encourage you to register for that event on August 29th. Okay, so let's go back to the questions. How do I get most of the mock interviews? What are the best people to do it with? This is an excellent question. So as I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to find people in your network who are essentially individuals who have gone on this journey. And so that would be current students, if you know any, colleagues who have graduated from these institutions, individuals essentially who have walked the path, your mentors. And the more people that you have, the better it's going to be, the more practice time you get. And obviously, if you work with a coach, they're going to be the ones who know the most up-to-date data in terms of what the interviewers are looking for, what the schools are looking for, what the patterns of questions are. I know that we have a database of questions that we collect every single year in terms of what are the questions, and be able to provide you with guidance in terms of that. Mock interviews, in terms of what to get the most out, how to get the most out of an MBA, of a mock interview, it's essentially showing up prepared, thinking as if that mock interview is your official interview. That will help you sort of like get a little bit excitement into you in terms of thinking that this is actually the space that this is the interview. This is the interview day. How have I put my best foot forward already? And then really being open to the feedback that you get from the person giving you the feedback. I would say, obviously, like you have to take everything with a grain of salt in terms of what feedback is and how beneficial it is to your story. If you're working with a coach, obviously the coach will know your story, knows what they're looking for, and can give you a lot more advice in terms of what's the best way. Sometimes I've heard feedback from people that the feedback wasn't really that helpful. So, just know who the people that you are asking are, and how invested are they in your success. So it's not about just asking anyone to do a mock interview. It's really that their investment into your success is actually really important, because that will determine the kinds of thoughtfulness that they're going to put into the responses, into giving you feedback to help you prepare better responses. This is a beautiful question. How should I answer a question that I did not practice? If you practiced enough questions, well, first and foremost, everyone is going to get a question that they didn't practice. And that's normal, because the interview is not just about following a list of questions, but it's really getting to know you. Therefore, the interviewer may be interested in something that you didn't think that they would be interested in. And that's normal. However, if you have done enough practicing of your other interviews, you will know other interview questions. You will know the patterns of what it means to give a good response of an interview, of a question, in a question rather. So if you haven't practiced, you're going to, and this is why you actually need a lot of practice to be successful here. You're going to mentally look at all of the examples that you have put together, that you have prepared, and see which one of them closely relates to answering the question, and then use that one, right? However, sometimes you haven't prepared an answer to the question, or you don't actually have an answer. Like, you've never experienced the question that they're asking. And in those situations, you're going to want to come clean initially and just say, I actually haven't experienced something like that. However, then you give an example of how you would handle a situation like that should you be confronted with it in a future scenario, imagined scenario. So you are not just saying, well, I don't have an answer for you, but you are giving them still something that helps them get a better sense of how you think about problems that you encounter. So let's see, do we have time for one more question? All right, one more question, and then we'll end the session today. How can I prepare for group interviews or team-based discussions? Excellent. This is, so the team-based discussion is, actually, the only school that does a group interview is a team-based discussion is Wharton. And this is a very, very unique preparation process. We're going to be announcing a mock interview experience with us, later, and stay tuned for that. However, in terms of preparation, Wharton does send out a prompt as part of the interview invite. You must research the prompt, come up with your own solution to the problem that you're presented with, answer all the questions, all the deliverables that they're expecting, and be able to essentially give a 1-minute pitch of your solution to the problem. The actual team-based interview, team-based discussion will involve your contributions to the idea in terms of how much research have you done in advance and what can you present to them. It also involves how you engage with the community, with the group in front of you in terms of, how you're working with them. And then there's a one-on-one afterwards. So it's a very different approach to any of the traditional interviews. That will definitely have more sessions on that as the time, as we get closer to time in terms of when the interview invites are going to come out for Wharton. So we'll continue these conversations, but just know that it's a very different interview style. I wouldn't worry about that one at this moment. I would worry about the general MBA interview preparation and making sure that you have that nailed down before the beginning of October, when interview invites are coming out. So thank you for being here with me today. If you want to talk about how we can support your interview preparation, please reach out for a consultation call, and we'll be happy to talk about what our approach looks like and how you can benefit from that. And if you can benefit from that, maybe it's not something you're looking for. So we'll be happy to explore that and be able to support you on that journey. And next week, we're going to talk about the video submissions, video essays, however you want to call them, for a few schools in the top 20 MBA categories or any top 20 rank that you'll need to also nail in order to have a successful round 1 submission. So join me then. And until then, have a wonderful close to your round 1 applications, and we'll see you in a week.